They'll betray you, lie to you, humiliate you, and then somehow make you feel guilty for it. That's the terrifying power of a narcissist's manipulation. They make their sins feel like your fault. But once you see through the illusion, once you realize their blame is just a mirror reflecting their own darkness, everything changes. The narcissist lives in a psychological world where admitting fault feels like annihilation. To them, being wrong isn't just uncomfortable, it's intolerable. Their sense of self is built on a fragile illusion of superiority and control, so when something threatens that image, their mind reacts defensively. They cannot face the weight of their own flaws, failures, or cruelties, because doing so would force them to confront the emptiness beneath their grand facade. And so, instead of accepting responsibility, they project their guilt and shame onto you. It's a subconscious survival strategy, a way to preserve their identity at the expense of your peace. When they lie and are caught, they accuse you of dishonesty. When they hurt you, they claim you're the one being cruel. Their guilt becomes your guilt, their shame becomes your burden. It's as though they take the ugliest parts of themselves and hand them to you, insisting that they belong to you instead. The emotional effect is devastating because it doesn't just confuse you, it erodes your sense of self. Over time, you begin to internalize their false narrative. You start doubting your own intentions, questioning whether you really did something wrong, even when you know deep down you didn't. This is how they maintain power, by keeping you trapped in a fog of guilt that was never yours to begin with. The narcissist's projection is not random, it's targeted. They instinctively sense the empathy in others, the ones who are kind, introspective, and conscientious, and they exploit that. You, the person who strives to understand others, who feels deeply, who takes responsibility easily, become the perfect container for their disowned emotions. They offload their internal chaos onto you, and you, because you care, try to make sense of it. You take on their pain, their accusations, their endless blame, thinking if you can just figure it out, maybe peace will return. But that peace never comes, because their projection is not about truth, it's about control. This mechanism allows the narcissist to continue living in denial. They convince themselves they are the victim, that the world mistreats them, that others are unfair or disloyal. They rewrite every story so they remain innocent, justified, or misunderstood. It's a narrative built to protect their ego from collapse. The problem is, that narrative requires a villain, and that villain is always you. Every time they feel shame, it must be deflected. Every time they do harm, it must be blamed elsewhere. They need to see you as the problem, so they never have to see themselves clearly. If you observe closely, you'll notice the pattern repeats itself in cycles. The narcissist does something wrong, denies it, reverses the roles, and makes you defend yourself against their projection. The more you explain, the deeper you sink into their psychological trap. Because logic doesn't work with projection. You can't reason someone out of a defense mechanism that exists to protect their ego. What they fear most is accountability. To them, taking responsibility means exposing the rot underneath the mask. That's why they fight so hard to make sure the blame never sticks to them. This behavior stems from deep insecurity, but it manifests as arrogance. They must always be the one who is right, who knows better, who is above reproach. And to maintain that illusion, someone else must carry their darkness. The more you absorb their projections, the lighter they feel. You become the emotional dumping ground for everything they refuse to face. It's an unfair exchange, one that leaves you exhausted, confused, and burdened by guilt that isn't yours. Yet to them, it feels like balance. It feels justified, because in their distorted worldview, they are never the cause of the pain, only the victim of it. The tragedy is that projection prevents growth. As long as they keep projecting, they can never heal, never evolve, never truly connect. But for you, the one caught in their web, recognizing this projection is the beginning of freedom. It allows you to separate their emotions from your own, to see that the shame you feel was never born within you but handed to you by someone running from themselves. Every accusation a narcissist makes is a confession disguised as blame. It's one of the most deceptive and disorienting behaviors they engage in. When they accuse you of lying, it's often because they are lying. When they say you're selfish, it's because they're acting out of self-interest. When they claim you don't care, it's because their own empathy is hollow. These accusations aren't based on truth, they're projections of their inner world. They speak not to describe you, but to unload the traits they can't bear to acknowledge in themselves. The narcissist sees in you what they refuse to confront within. This psychological reversal is not accidental. It's a form of manipulation designed to control perception. They understand that if they accuse first, they can steer the narrative. Whoever makes the accusation often appears more credible, more confident, more in control. They use this instinctively. By accusing you, they throw you off balance. Suddenly, you're on the defensive, scrambling to prove your innocence, explaining yourself over and over. The moment you do, you've stepped into their trap, because now the focus has shifted away from what they did and onto how you are responding. It's a masterful deflection that keeps them safe from exposure. Their accusations are emotionally charged and strategically timed. They strike when you're vulnerable, when you're confused, or when you've finally gathered the courage to call them out. The intensity of their words can make you doubt your perception. They'll insist you're the one twisting things, that your memory is wrong, that you're being unfair or cruel. The conviction in their tone makes you question what's real. Over time, this creates cognitive dissonance, a painful mental split between what you see and what you're told. The more you try to reconcile those two realities, the more exhausted you become. The narcissist thrives on that exhaustion. It gives them control. If you're too drained to argue, too uncertain to trust yourself, they win. Their accusations aren't just words, they're weapons of confusion. Each one is designed to blur the line between truth and fiction until you no longer know where you stand. They turn morality upside down. Wrong becomes right, cruelty becomes concern, and deceit becomes self-defense. And because you're a person who values fairness and reflection, you internalize those accusations, thinking maybe you really did something to provoke them. That's how they make their lies feel real. The irony is that through their accusations, they reveal everything about themselves. Their words are mirrors of their internal chaos. When they accuse you, they're unconsciously describing their own behavior. But since they lack self-awareness, they can only express those traits by projecting them outward. In that way, every time they speak in blame, they're confessing the truth they refuse to live with. The more you listen carefully, the clearer it becomes that their words are not reflections of you, but echoes of their own darkness. Recognizing this turns confusion into clarity and silence into strength. The narcissist's manipulation thrives on your empathy and self-doubt because those are the qualities that make you human. Empathy is your strength. It's what allows you to connect, to forgive, to understand. But to a narcissist, it's a weakness to be exploited. They know that if they can trigger your compassion, they can control your reactions. They'll play the victim, twist their own cruelty into tales of suffering, and make you feel responsible for their pain. They'll remind you of your kindness, not to honor it, but to weaponize it. Every time you second-guess yourself or feel guilty for standing up to them, they gain power. It starts subtly. They test your empathy by sharing stories that make you pity them, a tragic past, an unfair world, people who misunderstood them. You listen, you care, you offer comfort. That's when the conditioning begins. Your empathy becomes the hook that keeps you tethered to their chaos. When they later lie, insult, or withdraw, you don't react with anger, you react with concern. You wonder what went wrong, what pain they might be carrying, what you could do differently to make things better. They depend on that instinct, because as long as you're focused on their emotions, you're not focused on their actions. Then comes the self-doubt. Narcissists are masters at creating confusion. They'll contradict themselves, deny things they said, or twist your words until you question your own memory. You might start keeping mental notes or rereading messages just to reassure yourself that you're not imagining things. They'll accuse you of being sensitive, dramatic, or unstable, and over time those words start to stick. You begin to wonder if you really are overreacting. This is how your reality gets rewritten, one doubt at a time. They chip away at your confidence until you depend on them for clarity, which gives them total control over how you see yourself. Empathy and doubt create a perfect loop for the narcissist. When they hurt you, your empathy tells you to understand them. When you feel pain, your doubt tells you not to trust yourself. You end up apologizing for things that aren't your fault, forgiving behaviors that should never be excused, and rationalizing what you know is wrong. It's a psychological trap that keeps you stuck in an emotional maze designed by someone who knows exactly which buttons to press. The more you care, the deeper you fall into their control. What makes this dynamic so dangerous is that it feels like love. You think you're being compassionate, patient, loyal, and you are. But they're not relating to you in the same way. To them, your empathy is a tool, your doubt is leverage, and your loyalty is a guarantee that they can keep repeating the same cycle without consequence. It's not about connection, it's about domination, and they sustain that power not through force, but through your own goodness turned against you. Recognizing the narcissist's blame game is the first and most crucial step in breaking free from their control. It begins when you stop taking their words at face value and start seeing the patterns beneath them. You begin to notice how every argument ends with you feeling at fault, no matter what happened. You see how they twist events to make themselves look innocent, how they rewrite conversations to fit their version of reality, how they always find a way to shift responsibility. Once you start connecting these dots, you begin to see that it's not you who's unstable or overly sensitive, it's them who's manipulating the truth to protect their ego. This awareness is painful at first. It feels like betrayal because you realize that the person you trusted was never playing fair. You see how many times you apologized when you were the one who was hurt. You see how often you silenced yourself to avoid conflict, thinking that peace was more important than truth. But once your eyes open, you can't close them again. The manipulation becomes obvious, the timing, the tone, the way they use silence or anger to corner you. What once felt confusing now starts to make sense. Their tactics are predictable, repetitive, and designed to keep you emotionally off balance. The moment you recognize their blame shifting, the dynamic begins to change. Their control weakens because it thrives on your confusion. When you stop defending yourself, when you stop explaining, when you stop trying to prove your innocence, you remove the fuel that feeds their manipulation. They'll notice it immediately. They may intensify their attacks, accuse you of being cold or unkind, or try to guilt you back into submission. But if you hold steady, something powerful happens. Their words start to lose their effect. You begin to feel the emotional distance growing between you and their chaos. Recognition gives you emotional clarity. You start to separate your feelings from theirs. You see their projections for what they are, reflections of their insecurities, not indictments of your character. You stop personalizing their behavior because you understand that it has nothing to do with who you are and everything to do with who they refuse to be. This is the beginning of freedom. The quiet moment when you realize that you don't have to participate in their drama anymore. You can step back, observe, and choose not to engage. The narcissist's power lies in illusion, the illusion that they're right, that you're wrong, that you're the problem. Once that illusion cracks, everything starts to crumble. You no longer see them as all-knowing or emotionally superior. You see the fragility behind their arrogance, the fear behind their rage. You begin to understand that their control was never real power, it was manipulation built on lies and fear. And by recognizing it, you reclaim your own mind, your own peace, and your right to define reality for yourself. True power comes from seeing reality clearly and refusing to carry the false guilt a narcissist tries to place on you. It's the power that comes when you stop living through their distorted lens and start trusting your own perception again. The narcissist builds their entire manipulation on confusion because if you can't see clearly, you can't resist. They want you to question everything, your memory, your reactions, your sense of morality. They create chaos and then stand calmly in the middle of it, making you believe you're the one who caused it. When you begin to see that dynamic for what it is, something inside you shifts. You realize that clarity itself is rebellion. Seeing reality clearly doesn't mean just understanding what they are. It means understanding who you are without their influence. It means separating your authentic voice from the one they tried to control. The narcissist thrives when you doubt yourself, but they lose all power the moment you see that their version of you was never real. They called you selfish because you set boundaries. They called you cold because you stopped reacting. They called you crazy because you started questioning. Every label they used was meant to keep you small and compliant. But when you see through those lies, you begin to feel the strength that was always within you, the strength they feared you would find. Refusing to carry their false guilt is not an act of defiance, it's an act of liberation. It means handing back the emotional baggage they dumped on you. The guilt, the shame, the responsibility for their feelings, none of it belongs to you. You were never responsible for healing someone who refuses to face their own truth. You were never meant to sacrifice your peace to maintain their illusion. Each time you release a piece of that guilt, you reclaim a piece of yourself. You begin to see that compassion doesn't require self-betrayal, that love doesn't mean losing your voice, and that forgiveness doesn't mean accepting abuse. Clarity gives you the power to act instead of react. You no longer need to justify, explain, or prove your worth. You no longer need their validation to feel whole. You begin to operate from truth, not from fear. And truth is something the narcissist cannot touch. When you stand in it, their manipulation falls apart. Their lies no longer sting because you recognize the projection behind them. Their silence no longer controls you because you understand it as punishment, not reflection. Their anger no longer intimidates you because you see it for what it is, a mask for weakness. In that awareness, you reclaim your autonomy. You realize that your calm, your boundaries, and your clarity are the very things they cannot stand, because those qualities mean they can no longer use you as a reflection of their false self. Seeing reality clearly becomes your quiet revolution, the moment when their power ends and yours begins.